in Sustainable Agriculture and Ag Economics at the University of Kentucky. And his work has involved projects on farmer-focused marketing, including direct marketing of meat products. And he's also been involved with beginning farmer training and helping farms transition to more sustainable practices. He's also had quite a bit of international experience with projects in Thailand and Poland and other countries, and he's taught a course on international trade and global food issues. And in addition to his academic duties at UK, he also serves as the land-grant university liaison for the USDA Southern SARE program, and I'll let him talk to you more about that. So with that, let's thank Lee for making the trip down from Lexington. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a neat formal setting, and I'm not sure about neat part, but so I'm Lee Meyer. Jeff gave you some background and stuff. I've got the PowerPoint slides and stuff, but I'd really like to make this as informal. Feel free to ask me questions. If we go off down some tracks, the goal is not to get done with the presentation. The goal is to have some interesting discussion and dialogue about sustainability. So what I hope to bring is sort of the economist's perspective to sustainability. Tell me about your majors. What are some of the majors represented in this room?
Plant pathology.
Plant pathology. How many plant pathologists? It's sort of UK. I think we have about 3 undergraduate plant pathologists. So are you in graduate school? Okay. Well, and a really good friend and colleague is a plant pathologist. And just so the rest of you know how weird they can be, he's been doing all this, in addition to the plant pathology work, on working with extension agents on global warming and dealing with the issue of GMOs. So it's been interesting working with Paul. What are some other majors?
Environmental engineering.
Environmental engineering. And that's in, how you organize, it's not in the College of Ag.
No, it's in the College of Engineering. Yeah,
engineering, okay. Very much engineering. Okay. How many engineer type people? Oh, okay. Okay. And what about you?
Agronomy.
Agronomy, okay. Are you from a farm background?
No.
No? Okay.
Horticulture.
Horticulture, okay. And when we talk about sustainable farms, that's what everyone thinks of, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit.
Animal science. I'm animal agribusiness. You see that?
Pretty good.
Agribusiness, good. Animal agribusiness. Any other business kind of people here?
Sociology. It's not business, but it's not like any of the other ones.
It's another one of the unnatural sciences, you know, because you have the natural sciences, and then the other ones must be the unnatural sciences, right? So, anything else? Okay, well, that helps a lot. The clicker. So what I want to do today is really bring economics to this whole issue of sustainability, my perspective on it. I'm going to talk about some tools that economics has, that if we want to move towards sustainability, that those tools can, I think, help the process go more expediently at lower cost. So we'll talk about those. And then Jeff mentioned that I work with USDA's SARE program. So there's 8 initials there. USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture. Anyone know what SARE stands for? Is it up anywhere? So.
Sustainable Agriculture and Research and Education.
Bingo. Good. And so I've been working with that program for more than 15 years now, and so I'll tell you a little bit about that program because of all the great resources it has. Why do we care about sustainability? These are 3 of my 5 grandkids. One perspective is think about the long run. We one time, I was telling the story earlier today, we're applying for a proposal in the Kellogg Foundation. Big guys came down from Battle Creek where they make all the Kellogg cereals and stuff, but they've got a bunch of money. And they were asking us, how many sustainable farms do you have? And they were thinking along the little horticulture 5-acre farm direct marketing. And my colleague and boss said, we don't know yet, and they weren't quick enough to catch on that, but what we really meant is, let's see how many farms are still viable next generation, the generation after that. And I think that's sort of one of those common sense definitions of sustainability, and there's many ways. We're going to talk more about that too. Sometimes it says U.S. retained the livestock people in an abattoir. They're supposed to have a place, so if animals are diseased or something like that, they put them over there so they don't get into the food supply chain. They stuck me in there for a while. I think that, Jeff, going back when we started doing this, sustainability was so marginalized. People wanted to put us over in that cage sometimes so they didn't have to deal with us. And then my work with the SARE program, and I told you I'll talk about that. Okay. You've probably seen this question a lot, right? What is sustainability? Okay, what's just one piece of definition of sustainability?
Me?
Yeah.
I guess that it lasts.
Okay. What are some other?
Meeting our needs currently while not inhibiting the needs for future generations to meet their needs.
Okay. How many of you heard that definition before? Okay. From this class?
Mostly from Dr. Vincent.
And Dr. who?
Dr. Vincent. Ellen Vincent.
Okay.
That was the ground report? Yeah, it's 101.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that, I think I wish I was good enough with words to come up with definitions like that. So, what are some other perspectives?
Leaving the environment the same or better than you found it.
Okay. Very important. What are some other dimensions of sustainability? You've talked about long-termedness, environment. See, I can make up a word like long-termedness. You haven't heard that before. And I hope you don't repeat it either. A guy from Kentucky said that, Yeah.
I would say adaptive because you constantly have to change throughout time what you do, your practices, whatnot, because we change over time.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. And it's sort of interesting to take that adaptive concept and think about people talking about permaculture. And, so I don't know very much about permaculture at all, so I can be critical of it, right? So, but I mean, this concept of you can make something permanent, it's the intention of that steadfastness, but I'm not sure that we can know enough to do that. And so, as you said, adaptive. Certainly, the biological systems are adaptive, and we want to integrate those into sustainability. So that's a very important part. Erin, were you going to say something?
Oh, well.
You raised your hand before, so.
That's very different. I was thinking like all of the environmental and economic, resources that were the other definitions you're saying that we could use today, make sure that it's accurate tomorrow, making sure that they are available for everyone and not just
Okay.
and making sure that it's all
Okay, in that last part that you said about making available to other people, that's one of the things that hasn't been brought up yet. So how many of you have seen where we talk about the 3 pillars of sustainability? Okay, and when you see that, what typical are those 3 pillars? You've said them already, but what are those 3 pillars?
Environment.
Okay, environment,
Society, and economics.
Society, and economics. And you can use different words and say them in different ways, but those are really the 3, and that captures a lot of what I like to talk about. When you go home and you talk about sustainability, how many of your parents you think say, "Oh, it's just a fad, it'll go away"? Do you hear that very much? I mean, I hear that all the time. And so with my job in extension, I'm traveling around talking to farmers and extension agents, and I'll do an extension agent training. a lot of times you really get this sense, if we're just patient enough, it'll go away. We don't have to worry about those sustainability folks anymore. And I've really thought about this a lot. And so one of the dimensions, first of all, I don't think it's a fad. I think it's substance, and probably wouldn't be ethically be able to stand up here if I didn't believe that. One perspective on that I've compared it to is democracy. So you've all taken history classes. When did democracy get started?
Depends on which version is counted.
Okay. Tell me more.
Well, you can go back to Greek, you can go back to different areas where there was a representative government.
Okay, so there's history in the Greek government. Pardon me?
Hammurabi's Code, you can go all the way back to there.
Okay. So you had all that democracy, and then it sort of went away. And then in the 1400s, 1500s, it started coming back with the French Revolution, the American Revolution. And so then we had democracy, didn't we? And so there was a sense that a value of self-determination, that I have a role and ability in society to direct where my society is going. That's sort of my definition of what democracy is, right? And if you could go back then, I suspect that there was that conversation at home when Thomas Jefferson was talking to his parents. They said, "It's just a fad. It'll go away. Let's not worry about it very much, And so there was a sense then of everybody had self-determination, right? That's democracy. Okay? But everybody, what did everybody mean? Were you everybody? Well, no. Why?
Because I have my own personal beliefs and...
No, that's because you're a woman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you didn't count. You weren't a real person. So if you were a white man and owned land, then democracy was for you. But other than that, and so you can make this comparison of the evolution of a principle. It started out societally. I'm not a sociologist, but, I thought about this a lot, and that society, deals with values like that, the ones that really have substance, we start building on and strengthening. And so we still don't have it all figured out, but we've sort of gotten there now. And so, and I think sustainability is one of those same things. You are on the leaders of this now. You wouldn't be in this class if you thought it was a fad, and you're here because you think it really does have some substance. So I think that's, one part of sustainability. And then the other part is, where is it, why is it being accepted as a value? Have you thought about that at all? So why are we, if we are seeing this transformation, I think we are, what makes people latch onto? Why are they concerned about the other way? Why are they concerned about things not being sustainable? What's your generation think about that? Pardon me?
Probably the need to reduce reliance on non-renewable energies, climate change.
Okay, climate change. Okay.
Ever-growing, population growth and demands to meet the needs of people and their health, and
so those things. I think one of them is, we've had, in fact, even in my generation, had this frontier mentality. There's always someplace else to go. In the United States, we just went west, and we went west. If we need more land, we go west. And even in recent years, we need more land. What do? Cut down the rainforest, don't we? Now we've decided that isn't going to work anymore. There are no more frontiers. And even when you look at the oceans, you know, we see that plastic island, the Gyra or whatever it's called, out in the Pacific. There's a what's the documentary called? Plastic Island. It's, you know, it's not sensational. It's just, here's the facts, ma'am, and it really is scary when you see what's going on. What's going on in the Gulf of Mexico? The dead zone, right? So all the nutrients-loaded water that's coming out of Mississippi going into the Gulf of Mexico is leading to biological changes in the dead zones there. And those are what, you can go to NOAA website and they document and they show on their website, you know, how it changes seasonally, but it's still going on. I think something else is there's some concerns about technology, as there's not always a technological fix for things. Antibiotic resistance in livestock is something that is very scary, isn't it? You know, because if we can't use those antibiotics for us, and we have the superbugs, and that's an issue. The use of glyphosate, when the whole Roundup Ready and all that is a very, very complicated issue, and we could spend a month just on that. But we have Roundup resistant weeds. So the Roundup resistant pigweed, and so, you know, my natural science colleagues will say, you know, those things are all predictable, but we went down that path anyway because it's simple, it's an easier way to farm. There's it's been, you know, short-term profitable. So there's all those things going on. That why, I really do think there's good evidence that we are entering into this new world about sustainability. So, you know, it's there, that's where we're going. So I've talked about that. Now, how do we start bringing in economics to this? Let's see. I even remembered to say all those things. Sometimes I have to go back in my slides and see if I really... Jeff, do you ever do that? You know.
Not as good as you are.
Oh, okay. We sort of talked about this, the Farm Bill, this integrated system, in the environmental quality, use of non-renewable resources, sustain the economic viability of farm operations, enhance the quality of life. So we talked a little bit about this. Farmers and ranchers and society as a whole. So this is really pretty good, and it's amazing that I had to say this, that Congress can do something that, you know, sort of makes sense sometimes. So that was and the reason I put that up there, because that's the basis and the background for the SARE program. Some of the things you said, long-term perspective, must satisfy environmental, economic, well-being, and social responsibility goals. Has anyone ever heard of the term Pareto better? Well, good. You've heard almost everything I've said so far, so that's new. I'm going to come back to that in a second. The other thing that I've learned, and, you know, I have these great aha moments that is an aha moment to me and nobody else, but this has been very important for me, is sustainability is a process of improvement. So that question about how many sustainable farms you have, not only do we not know, it's a continuum. And so, especially for somebody working in extension, what I'm concerned about is how do we make things more sustainable? So it's not a question, if we talk about is this farm sustainable or not sustainable, are people going to like us? No. I mean, what we're doing is we're isolating people, we're marginalizing things, we're making, how many of you, you know, would admit to being unsustainable? Okay. And if you went and asked, that's really interesting. I'm glad you did that, because you guys know that. Now, if you ask traditional South Carolina farmers how many of you are unsustainable, I don't think we'd get that same recognition of the concerns that we have. I think, well, I'm doing my best. Yeah, I could change things, but it's going to cost me. And so if it's going to cost me, that's hurting my sustainability. So we tend to rationalize where we are. So, and a way to get around that is most everybody wants to be more sustainable. So you get people on board about being more sustainable, then you have to start pushing a little bit more. And to really make change, sometimes it gets a little bit uncomfortable. And that's complicating things. Pareto better, there was an economist, I'm finally getting to economics, there was an economist named Albert Pareto, and I really forgot his first name, but I thought he should have a first name, so I made that up, by the way. Dr. Pareto was an economist, and he talked about utility maximization, and most of you have taken Econ 101 or 201 or whatever it is at Clemson, and you learn about utility. So economists say everybody has this drive to improve their welfare or their utility. So then what we do is we look at allocations of resources, and so economists just say, they go through all the graphs and stuff like that. But the bottom line is we talk about efficiency. And we say it's not an efficient system if you can make at least one person better off without hurting everybody else. So Pareto better is what can we change to really make things more sustainable? And you look around, and there are practices that we can do that will improve sustainability of farms or businesses or other operations that really don't cost much. So one of the things at the University of Kentucky, what we did a couple of years ago is hired an engineering firm. We've got some engineers here who assessed the university, and they said, what we will do is you give us a contract and you pay us $300,000 a year, and then what we're going to do is we're going to install all these energy-saving practices, and then we guarantee you that you will save enough fuel, enough energy to pay the $300,000 and have money left over. Okay, that's a Pareto better situation. How did that come about? Well, through improvements in technologies, lighting, switches, motors, controls. We have a place called the Delta Room, and it's a room this size, or half as big as this. There's about 87 computer monitors in there, and these geeks sit there and look at those monitors, and they control the heating and air conditioning in every place in the university. And they've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars by doing that. Okay, so that's a Pareto better situation. But a lot of the outcomes are going to be where it's not a simple Pareto better, it's a trade-off. So you have to give up something to improve sustainability. And that's where things start getting tough, where you tell somebody, okay, we're going to keep the thermostat at 68 degrees, not during the summer, during the winter, instead of 74 where you like it. Or, I go into a hotel room and instead it's 68 and I'm freezing, and because they think their guests want it cold. And so you have these complex interactions there about what people want and sustainability. So how can we improve sustainability? The easy ones are here, and so if we're looking for how do we adopt practices, let's look for things where it's a net gain. But if not, we have to look at some other things. We've done some work on growing corn organically in Kentucky. In fact, we got a SARE grant to do that. We put together an interdisciplinary team. We did some demonstration plots. It wasn't research, but we did some demonstration plots. We did workshops. We put together a nice publication that went into, access to seeds, planting, harvest mechanics, cleaning out the combines so you don't contaminate it, marketing, all those dimensions. But one of the things you find out with growing corn, well, what's one of the biggest problems with growing corn organically? Anyone know? How many are from farm backgrounds, by the way? Sort of. Okay. Well, I'm not. My father's a food broker. And so when I started in Extension, everyone thought I was one of those evil marketing people, so I had to learn to get acceptance from the farmers. One of the biggest problems with growing corn organically is weed management. How do you manage weeds in organic systems? Well, you till it up. So when the corn's small, you run the tiller down the road, down between the rows, and you turn over, and the weeds dry out, and the roots get exposed, and the weeds die. That's not a win-win situation, because what happens when you have to run the tiller 2 or 3 times is you start, you use fuel, first of all. You use, along with fuel, you're eating up the organic matter in the soil, you're exposing it to more air. So growing corn organically to somebody from the outside really looks like a very, organic corn is more sustainable, right? We're not using Roundup, we're not using artificial fertilizers, we're not spraying it for borers, and so it's better. But when you step back and look at it critically, and I think one of the things I would hope you'll do is really look at these questions critically, is that let's look at organic corn and see if it's really more sustainable than conventional corn, and then start, not that it's better or worse, let's then try to find a system that really does produce corn better, that protects the soil, protects the environment, but is also good from the soil side, the production side, and things like that. Okay, and the title I gave Jeff or Kelly, I talked about market failure. What I didn't start with, and I should have, is that in a market-driven system like we have, markets are the communicating device that helps businesses make their decisions. Businesses and consumers make their decisions. If you go to the grocery store and you see you want to get pizza, make a pizza, and you're looking at 2 different kinds of mozzarella cheese, and one is 10 cents a pound less than the other one, which do you buy? The less expensive one. So you see prices all the time, and we respond to prices, and that's the signal. That's how economics, the core part of economics, in terms of getting us to make decisions. So if you are a mozzarella cheese producer and you can make the less expensive cheese, you're going, because of your practices or whatever, then when you get into the market and you can sell it less expensively, your sales go up, you grow your business because you're going to be rewarded. The market is telling your consumers this, and so whatever processes you have, because you're a better mozzarella cheese maker, allows you to expand, and so that's sort of the core part of economics. Now, I am very critical of the market system we have. Why? Anyone know what the principles of competitive markets are? How many of you had intro to economics? Okay. So what are the principles for a competitive market? Okay, one.
Undergirding of.
Yeah. Okay. So one is what?
Rule of law.
Rule of law. Okay.
That laws and regulations are upheld, for example.
Okay.
Low barriers to entry.
Low barriers to entry. large numbers of buyers, large number of sellers, and perfect information. So, and those are all theoretical stuff. But when you look at our economy now, in most sectors, how many sellers do we have? Very few. We have monopolies and oligopolies driving the system rather than a competitive marketplace. So the market struggles because of that. The pharmaceutical industry, the EpiPen thing. If there were 50 companies selling EpiPens, there wouldn't be a problem. But we allow there to be one or two companies, and so we go through these problems throughout our economy because of the structure we have. So not exactly related to sustainability, but I had to get that in here. So then you have other kinds of market failure, imperfect information, enforcement costs, your regulations, and some things like that. The long-term value of things. So when we're talking about the mozzarella cheese, obviously that's for today. But when we're talking about preserving soils let's say, put it a different way, preserving the productivity of a farm, that's a multi-generation thing. It's the value, how do our kids and their kids value that? What about clean water? I grew up north of Cincinnati, and, the creeks there, it was just, you could look down the valley and it was just gray. The Ohio River was extraordinarily polluted. And so, we've changed those things, but back then they thought, oh, it's not a big deal, it'll go away. And it only went away because of bringing a recognition of the problems and then starting to build that in. Then the most important part, and it's sort of fun to talk about, is the external costs and benefits. They're called externalities. So what externalities are, those things that are not easily captured in the market. And air pollution of all types is one of the best examples of externalities. So if you have air pollution, if there's an oil refinery and it pollutes the air, then how does that get resolved? So so there's in Ashland, Kentucky, there's all these big oil refineries. They're billowing all this smoke and stuff like that. Technically, how does that get fixed? Okay, engineers. What? Okay. How do you stop air pollution?
Stop polluting it, give it enough time to break down.
Okay, well, how do you stop pollution, though?
Capture the air coming out and find a method to remove the contaminants from it.
Okay, sort of scrubbing. Is that what scrubbing is?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that free?
No.
Or expensive? Okay. So would you, if you're running Ashland oil, would you put those scrubbers in?
Only because the fines would be more.
Okay. And so what is the cost then of producing gasoline in those refineries? The cost is two components. It's the cost of the raw ingredients, the processing, and all that. That's the normal business part of producing gasoline. Then there's the external cost, which is the pollution that's imposed on the neighbors. So we're damaging them. We're imposing a cost on them. And you can even, whether it's a healthcare cost or cars rusting or whatever that is another cost that's being imposed. Now, the refinery is going to continue that until that cost is imposed on them. And what we mean, that's when we're saying it's internalized. So we're going to force them to deal with that. So there's two ways of doing that. One is a regulatory approach, where the EPA says you will put in this scrubber. The other is a market approach, where we say that we're going to charge you for that, and so we're going to make you pay 20 cents per gallon of gasoline, because that's the cost you're imposing on us. But if you want to put scrubbers in, then we won't charge you that anymore. So maybe you can put in scrubbers for the equivalent of 10 cents a gallon. You put in the scrubbers, you've now internalized that cost, you're not doing the air pollution anymore. Okay, so see where we're going in terms of market failure and then how to bring that into the market? Gasoline, my gasoline use. There's carbon emissions that come from that. There's this hard to define long-term impact of that, but we know that there's a negative impact in that. If we put a 50 cent a gallon tax on all of our gasoline use, what would we do?
Not drive as much.
We wouldn't drive as much. Next time you go to buy a car, you buy a fuel-efficient car.
Look for other ways to get around.
Look for other ways to get around.
And the price of absolutely everything goes up a minimum 50 cents per unit cost.
Right.
Just don't leave that out.
Right.
Yeah, including food.
Yeah. Yeah. So we would pay for that through whatever the ramifications of that are through the whole system. But what we've done is internalize that cost. And if we do that, then we let the market send signals to people on how to make those decisions. So, we're back to that quandary. Do we regulate it or do we not? One thing we could do in terms of the gasoline tax, the carbon tax on gasoline, is then we could rebate that back at the end of the year through sales tax or through income tax rebates. So you'd financially be as well off, and you could use that money to go pay for the additional cost of the groceries, your whatever it was, but you would be using less gas, and then you could make those decisions. So that's where markets come in here about capturing and internalizing those. Okay. Let's start. I'd like to get some of your ideas. Think of an external cost or an external benefit, and then we can talk about how we sort of internalize those. So what might be, so I talked about air pollution.
Just like an external cost of sustainability?
Yes. Yeah, it's related to sustainability. Or I think of like food production, farming, and we've talked about a few of those already. What might be?
You've got major runoff issues, you've got habitat change,
Okay.
soil erosion,
Okay, let's pick one.
major water runoff,
Okay.
nutrient-filled water runoff.
Okay.
I think you were talking about the dead zone in Ohio.
Okay. So we have that nutrient runoff. How could we resolve that?
Regulate runoff.
Okay, how would you regulate it?
Catch basins.
Okay. Okay.
Right? Right.
Well, yeah. I don't know if these are technically feasible, but so, every drainage field could we create a capture basin, and then the drains there, and over time, all this eroded soil would be there and stuff. We'd have to put that back, but that would be possible.
I know my senior capstone project, we were working with a wastewater plant.
Okay.
And their permits were getting increased regulation on phosphorus because it was in the middle of a farm community. And so they were getting spikes in phosphorus every time it rains.
Uh-huh.
And so their solution was they're just going to raise the water bills for the entire
Oh.
community. So it was forced back onto farms and the industries and the communities around.
So they were raising the money, the fees to then just clean up the water?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they got their limit right now is at 2 milligrams a liter of phosphorus. But the new permit was going to bring it down to 0.5 milligrams per liter of phosphorus.
Okay.
Released into the environment after treatment. So, because of all those spikes and everything, they were going to have to raise the cost of treating the water.
Okay. So that's more regulatory approach, and who are the gainers and losers there?
Kind of the community, because it was going to like neighborhoods too, and they're not even the ones farming.
Right.
But they get like that distribution of cost
Okay.
amongst them too.
Okay. Yeah.
I can't remember if it was an acid rain situation or the sulfur emissions from coal-fired power plants or something, but the EPA came up with something I thought was very comprehensive and flexible, where you establish a baseline for whether it's nutrient runoff in the Mississippi or pollutant X into the atmosphere, but the industry-wide, you establish a baseline, you say it's going to come down by 10% next year, you issue everyone billets essentially for what they produce in terms of pollutants. And they can buy and sell those amongst each other to give them the flexibility to overhaul an entire industry inside of, say, a decade. In fits and starts, these guys before those guys, what have you, but the industry itself basically decides.
Right.
In that regard. Was that the acid rain?
Yeah, it was sulfur. So sulfur emissions trading. And
Sulfur emissions trading.
Right.
Okay,
yeah. And so I don't know if you all got that. So what happened was that the way they established, you said it very well, establish a baseline, and then what happened, and what is so neat about this is that, so if your emissions were high, you brought them down significantly below that threshold, you could sell that right so then somebody else could actually pollute more, which, sounds ridiculous. But what it did is if you lowered it by 10%, you got the goals that we wanted, and it happened much less expensively because the people who could lower it the most could do it most inexpensively. So they really saved a lot of money, made money. Yeah.
It to their more polluting partners and so on.
Right.
It's like starting a system with a bunch of Bitcoin. And every year you suck out 10% of the Bitcoin. But in between, the players within the industry could sell each other, buy and sell pollution credits, essentially.
Yeah. California's trying to do this with carbon. But it's harder to come up with a contract for carbon that you can trade, but they're trying to do that. Are there any external benefits? What do farmers do other than the direct production of food and fiber?
Benefits is broadly defined as possible.
Broadly defined as possible.
Certain wildlife, and I'm thinking of honeybees may see a boon from certain kinds of agricultural activity.
Oh, yeah. The honeybee is sort of interesting. I mean, it's a very complex issue in terms of pollination. But if I have a friend, we live in the suburbs. He has 3 hives. If I planted my whole yard to clover, that would be to his benefit rather than mine. So his bees would make a lot of honey, and then we could try to work out a trading deal where he pays me for doing that, and then we would be internalizing that.
5 jars every
right. And maybe there's so I said there's the market mechanism, there's the regulatory mechanism, and then there's the friend mechanism where you just work things out among neighbors. We didn't talk about that. That's probably the ideal one in the idealistic sense. You've heard of the term ecosystem services. I'll nod your head, right? Can anyone define what ecosystem services are?
Are you talking like one of the ecosystem services, more of like environmental services,
Mm-hmm.
or like stormwater management and like?
Well, all those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, wildlife habitat. If you have a forest, if you have a 500-acre farm and 200 acres are forest, that's certainly contributing to air cleanliness. It's capturing erosion. No one's paying you for doing that. But if we went out and said, okay, we're going to assess your farm for these different characteristics, and we will pay you $50 an acre for forest, we'll pay you $25 an acre a year for brush wildlife habitat or prairie grasses or things like that. Yes.
It's a little bit more direct than that, but my grandfather in Iowa, he runs corn and soybeans,
Mm-hmm.
and he keeps big woodlots in between for wind control and stuff like that in the wintertime, and he rents those out on the weekends, 3-day pass, $1,000 for trophy buck hunters to come in, and he's got certain stands and stuff set up that he doesn't do anything, but, you know, maintain the stands and keep the flames of fire clear, and he'll make, you know, $2,000-3,000 a weekend, and it's cutting down on the deer that are eating his corn and soybeans. So
And
helping the deer and helping himself all at the same time. A little bit more
yeah.
than what he
Well, right. And so that's a direct example. Those are not external benefits. He's internalized those by the market actually is working there, and that's not an externality because he's able to rent that land to those trophy buck hunters. And
with a lot better quality of deer than a lot of the other places around because they only go after certain individuals and eat culls.
uh-huh.
So, I mean,
Oh.
with a much healthier deer population.
So he has a whole enterprise where it's focused on. It's not just marginal land, but he's actually managing it for trophy hunters.
Yeah, he farms to hunt. He doesn't hunt to farm.
So, well, that's interesting. And then there's also the side benefit of the fewer deer predating on his corn, and plus the wind benefit and stuff like that. So, you know, how do we internalize those? We talked about the sulfur emissions, doing that. Ecosystem services, we can pay for farmers to have those things, and so if we offer a payment of, say, $50 an acre for forest, then if farmers are thinking about, should I cut down this 20 acres of woodlot that has a nice watershed in it, and expand my corn acreage, or should I keep it as woods? Well, if he's getting $50 an acre for that, then you're more likely to then keeping that in woods. And so what we've done then is shifted their decision making in a way that promotes sustainability. How much time do we have?
I think we're at time.
Okay.
I was going to grab your handout. You want me to?
Oh, yes. Okay, so there are, that's background just on what is sustainable agriculture. And then there's some other stuff about the programs that SARE offers and materials. And they have all these books that tend to be $10 or $20, but you can download them for free. So if you want to learn about soils or pollinators, all those things are there. I was just really talking about, I'll end with this last two slides. So as giving examples of things that I would have otherwise covered. Final example is how do we move from a less sustainable system to a more sustainable system? So and I'll just leave you with this question. A few years ago we had we had a very bad drought in Kentucky, not this bad, but the solution to that is intensive rotational grazing. And so we can do those kind of things. When we have a drought, these systems are much more resilient than an open pasture system. But the question is how do we help farmers go from the extensive system into the intensive system, and the benefits that come from that. So I will end there, hoping that you will think a little bit more about how markets fit in your discussions of sustainability. And if you have any more questions about that, Jeff will be glad to answer. So.
And I think Lee's going to be around a little bit
Yeah.
later, too, if you want to stay for questions. So let's all...
Thanks for that.
Oh.
Thanks for taking a market-based approach.
Oh, good. You're welcome.
One other thing I would mention to the guys in the back, talking about deer hunters, I read that in the 90s, I've since corrected, but Audubon lands in Connecticut and New York, where the wolves, the apex predators have been removed over 100 years ago, and they stopped allowing local hunters to hunt them. They found a corollary cost, and thus the removal of which became a benefit was that the deer were destroying saplings of young hardwoods, as well as annual